Hey, this is Manny with Not Waiting to Live, and in this video, I'm going to teach you what to look for when buying a used car. I'm a former Mercedes Benz car salesman, so I've been in more used cars than the average car buyer. What I've learned is that finding a good used car is as much about getting the research right as it is getting the inspection right. So with this video, I'm going to show you how to do both. And the good news is that a lot of this is common sense. I'm not going to spend too much time talking common sense, but even for the people with a lot of common sense, there are still things that get missed. So before I get into the research or the inspection, I just want to cover 5 really quick, top 5 common things that people with common sense overlook and miss when they're buying a used vehicle. The first thing, the bottom of the list, the easiest, cheapest mistake, buying a car without a gas cap. Now, this could be a little bit of a red flag. If somebody's driving around without a gas cap, they probably don't care too much about the other parts of their vehicle. But make sure you flip the gas cap open. If it's not there, make sure you get $10 from this seller or lower the price by $10. The number 4 item on the list that I like to point out is buying a car that doesn't have a spare or a jack. Now, over a used car's lifetime, there are flat tires happen and people have to put their spare to good use, and that's not always a bad thing. That doesn't mean that it's being neglected, but just make sure it's there because that could cost you $100 or more to replace. The number 3 item that I'd put on the list is buying a car without the extra key fob. So a lot of times it's an honest mistake. The seller will have multiple key fobs, but maybe they only hand over one. They just genuinely forgot, left it in a drawer somewhere or with a relative or somebody else who drove the car. So just make sure you ask that question and see if another key fob's available, because regular keys are cheap to replace, but a key fob could cost $100 or more. The number 2 mistake that I would put on this list of things that are commonly overlooked is to look at all 4 tires to make sure they're road ready. Because if you're driving around on 1, 2, 3, or all 4 tires that need to be replaced, that could be a $400 to $800 mistake right out of the gate before you can even drive this thing. So make sure you inspect all 4 tires. And I'm going to show you in this video just a real quick trick to make sure that you're driving around with good tires. And the biggest mistake that a used car buyer makes when they're looking for a used vehicle is they buy a car that has some eminent problems with it. Now, I'm going to show you how you can use this little $20 tool to make sure you don't have any engine troubles or that somebody didn't clear the check engine light before you showed up to look at the car. But I'm also going to show you a step in the research phase to protect yourself against buying a problematic vehicle. There's a lot of good information out there about vehicles, especially once they have gone through the paces over the years. So I do want to add, if at any point you find this video helpful, please take the time to like the video. This is the way the YouTube algorithm picks up my content. It gives this video and my channel more exposure, and I would greatly appreciate your help. So thanks in advance. Moving on to the research portion of this video, let's assume that you already have a specific vehicle in mind. Now, I have separate videos on this channel about determining how much you can afford to pay for a car that's set in your budget, or how to negotiate a vehicle price, whether that's a used car, a new car, a lease. But let's assume you got that all figured out, and now you're honing in on a specific make and model year. You cannot afford to overlook just general problems that you find on a vehicle on the internet. And so what I could say, from speaking from experience, a few years ago I bought a 1994 Jeep Wrangler, and the internet had told me in advance that the 4-cylinder models had a different transmission than the 6-cylinder models, and the 4 cylinders were problematic. They'd go out around 100,000 miles. Well, I knew it, and even though I knew it, I went and I got a 4-cylinder because it's all I could find near me. The inspection was great. It was this vehicle. It's spent a whole life in Florida. I live in Cleveland, so any Jeep around me was going to be completely rusted out, but down in Florida there was no rust on this vehicle, and I bought it anyways, and within 10,000 miles, sure enough, that transmission went out. I love the thing, but I just knew it. And so It's one thing to give your car to a mechanic and have them speak in generalities and talk in broad strokes about what could go wrong. But it's another thing to be aware of the nuances of your specific make and model year vehicle, and the internet will love to tell you those things, so take the time to Google what that is. Once you're comfortable with a specific make and model year, you're going to hone in on a specific car. And you have several options. You can go to a dealer, which is going to give you more confidence in the vehicle, that you're getting what you're paying for, but there will be a bit of a premium attached to it. You could go to a private seller, which you'll have a little bit less confidence in, but you might get more of a deal. And you could go to an auto auction, which you'll have the least confidence in because you're buying it as is, but that could give you potentially the best deal that you're going to find anywhere. In any case, you have two main options to determine the history of the vehicle. So the cheaper of the two services is AutoCheck. So they're able to tell you if a vehicle has been in a major accident. They look to see if there's been an insurance claim related to the vehicle or if it's been involved in a police report, and they're able to relay that information to you. The more comprehensive and expensive of the services is Carfax. So that's probably the most well-known to most car buyers. Carfax is able to tell you maintenance history, the associated mileage at those maintenance dates, and they can tell you a more specific ownership history and when the titles were transferred, as well as recall history, whether those recalls have been made on a vehicle, which can be useful. And the services are comparable for one car. So AutoCheck is $25 at the time of this video for one basic report. Carfax is $40 for one vehicle for a more comprehensive report. AutoCheck does have the advantage in that for $50 you can look at 25 cars with their basic report within a period of 21 days. So that might be helpful to somebody looking at the private car market, and you might be want to look at several cars, and you don't even want to waste your time on a car that's been in an accident before. So you use AutoCheck to find out in advance. If you're buying from a dealership, though, Carfax is pretty standard. Most dealerships include that information with their vehicle, and you can just request that information from them. So it's just an option to consider that you do have at minimum. There are other platforms as well, other services, but these are the two main services that you could consider to find out about the vehicle's history before you purchase it. And before I forget, something to mention for people buying a used car from a private seller: make sure there are no liens on that title. So there are two ways you can do that. You can either take the VIN number and run a search on the VIN number from the DMV website on your state's DMV website, or before you agree to finalize the sale and register the vehicle in your name, make sure you take that seller with you to the DMV, and together you go and try and register the vehicle in your name and make sure there's no problems. This is rarely an issue if you purchase from a dealer or an auction, but it may be an issue if you are in a private sale. Moving on to the vehicle inspection, I always recommend that you do this in daylight, not in a garage or at nighttime. And the way to get started is to move the car to an area where any potential leaks beneath the vehicle will be visible. So don't do this inspection on grass or gravel, or even it can be difficult on a blacktop. And the reason that you want to check for leaks: things on a car tend to leak before they break. So whether that's the oil or transmission fluid, radiator fluid, fuel, things will leak. And if this is occurring during your car inspection, this is definitely something you want to get checked out by a mechanic before you commit to purchasing the car. Once you move the car to where you want it to be, turn the front wheels out to one side, it doesn't matter which side, and leave the car running during your exterior inspection. And you're going to do this because you'll now have better access to inspect the wheels, but you'll also get the car warmed up for a moment later when you're going to check the oil. A good place to start inspecting the vehicle is to have a look at the tires. While the front wheel is turned out to one side, you're going to look at what will likely be a wear indicator on the tire, and that will let you know if there is enough tread left on the tire to be usable. So you don't want the tread to fall below that wear indicator. If there's not a wear indicator, you could take a penny and put it in the main tread there and make sure that it's covering up at least part of Abe Lincoln's head. And the more it covers up, the better. The longer the tires will last. While the tire is turned out to the side, you also want to check for the evenness of the wear on the tire. So move your hand across the tire, look on the inside. If it's feathering on one side or the other, that could be signs of an alignment issue or potentially a more serious issue with how the tire is actually secured to the vehicle. So take extra care to look over not just the front tires, but all 4 tires, because one tire could go bad and need replaced and have a different wear pattern than the rest. To inspect the brakes from the exterior, it's going to be tough to see, but you can have a look at the brake pad, and generally you want to see more than a 1/4 inch remaining on the brake pad. But during your test drive, you'll be able to confirm whether or not there are major issues with the brakes. With the car still on, have the seller test the headlights, high beams, fog lamps, turn signals, brake lights, emergency lights, anything that needs to function outside of the vehicle while you're outside of the vehicle. And while you're outside and walking around, pay close attention to the panels on the vehicle. Look to see if any of them have been repainted or if they are asymmetrical compared to their companion panel. So one door should sit with seams that match the opposing door. The quarter panels in the front or the back should be symmetrical. I mean, these are machine assembled nowadays, so any asymmetry is an indication that there may have been an accident, whether that's been reported or not reported. And for your interests, as long as you have an alternative car that you can buy, which there usually is, you shouldn't be considering cars that have been repainted. There are too many DIY jobs out there that won't work out in the long run. By this point, the car has been on for several minutes. There should be a steadiness to the hum of the idle of the engine. It doesn't need to sound perfect, but there should be a harmony of this idle sound. Any knocking or sounds like the engine's limping along or a very low idle, all of these things should be checked out by a mechanic before you commit to purchasing the vehicle. Now, before taking a reading of the engine's oil, just turn off the car and inspect the interior. This will give the engine a minute or 2 to cool off, which is recommended by most manufacturers. Inspect the interior to your own standards and your own expectations. Make sure that everything you would conceivably use will be fully functional. Make sure the windows go all the way up and all the way down on all the doors. Make sure all the doors open and close without a hitch. Make sure the mirrors are adjustable. Check the radio, any outlets, whether that's an input outlet or power outlet. Make sure the seats can adjust the way you want them to adjust. If there's a sunroof, check for functionality of the sunroof. Make sure that there's no signs of water damage. Really just apply a lot of common sense. Envision yourself driving this vehicle every day and check anything that you would normally use. Now you're ready to check the oil in the engine. And this doesn't matter if you have any automotive experience whatsoever. The purpose of this part of the inspection is just to make sure the vehicle wasn't totally neglected. And the way you'll determine that is just by looking at the color of the oil in the dipstick. So with the car off, go to the engine. There'll be a little picture that will let you know where the oil dipstick is. Take it out, wipe off the dipstick with a rag, put it back in the engine, pull it back out again, look at it. Make sure it doesn't look like Coca-Cola. It shouldn't be a super dark brown or a black. This could indicate that the engine has been neglected. The car hasn't been maintained well. Any other colors like a lighter brown or a gold, that's okay, that's good. And as a general practice, you should be replacing the oil anyways as soon as you buy the car, just so you can start from scratch. You can never really take someone's word for it of how often or when the last time they replaced the oil. Another check that you're going to want to run on the engine, particularly in a private sale or an auction, you're going to want to look for engine codes that aren't currently showing on the dashboard. which could be because somebody has changed the battery or because somebody's intentionally wiped the dash of the check engine lights. So every car made after 1996 and including 1996 can be read with an OBD2 scanner, and this connects to a standard port that can be found near where the gas pedal, brake pedal area is. And this device pulls the engine codes. Now, the one I have, I bought for $20. It does not work on diesel engines, but it will pull the codes for anything related to the engine, whether that's an O2 sensor or a spark plug or something more serious. And there are monitoring systems that can be pulled off the device, and you'll have to look more into the instructions, but you can basically tell if the dash has been cleared. And it takes a number of drive cycles before those check engine lights come back on. So you just want to make sure that what you're buying doesn't have a check engine light, because that's one of the biggest problems that people wind up having with their used car purchase, is a problem that was already there or about to happen. Now, this OBD2 scanner is not a magical device. It's for the low budget end. It's limited just to these standard codes. So it's not going to pull information if there's an anti-lock brake system light or an airbag light, or if your transfer case is leaking oil for your four-wheel drive. That it's not going to show up on these OBD2 scanners. So it's limited to the engine, but that still is a pretty big deal. The engine, the tires, and the brakes are what you need to get off the lot and take the car home on the road. So you should pay close attention to the engine, but know that you're still open to other things that could go wrong. At this point, you're ready for the test drive, and the goal here is just to make sure that nothing is out of sorts. The engine shouldn't be making any knocking sounds. The car shouldn't be lumping along. This is your opportunity to check the brakes. There is often a wear indicator on brake pads, such that if they are worn down, a material is going to make contact with the rotor. It's going to make a screeching sound or something that's out of the ordinary. Pay attention to listen for that. I will say on the brakes, if it has just rained and you apply pressure to the brakes, you might hear a low hum, but that is just associated with this kind of surface rust that comes off while you drive. So there is a difference between just brakes being wet or rotor being wet and there actually being a problem. But also pay attention when you're braking. It should be an even decline of speed. There shouldn't be any lumpy rotations. You shouldn't feel the car going up and down. That could be the sign of a warped rotor. That should be checked out and replaced. Something that might cause you to not purchase that vehicle, just an additional cost. So again, on the test drive, nothing special here. Just use a lot of common sense. If something seems out of whack, it probably is, and it's probably a red flag. So trust yourself here on the test drive. Don't give the benefit of the doubt to the seller. That sums up about all you need to look for on a used vehicle purchase. Cars made in the last couple decades have been really well built, regardless of what make or model you go with. If you found this video useful, I have other content on my channel about negotiating vehicle price, whether that's a used car, new car, leases. So make sure to check out that information as well. It'll help you out. And if you did like the video, take the time to like it. That's the way the YouTube algorithm picks up my content, gives me the incentive to make more videos like this. Thanks.